I was lying on the cold hospital bed, the beeping of machines echoing around me, when I overheard my family talking in the hallway. They thought I was asleep, maybe even unconscious. But I was listening, every single word cut into me like a knife. "She's old," my daughter-in-law hissed. "She doesn't even know what's going on anymore. Once she's gone, the house and the money will be ours. We just have to make sure she doesn't change anything in the will." My heart clenched. I gripped the blanket so tight my knuckles turned white. How could they? These were the people I had loved, cared for, and sacrificed everything for. My own son, Mark, stood silent, not defending me. His silence was worse than the words. Tears burned my eyes, but I stayed still, breathing quietly, pretending to sleep. They laughed as they walked away, their voices fading, leaving me trembling in anger. At that moment, I knew what I had to do. They wanted my money so badly. They would get something they could never forget. I am Eleanor Mitchell, an 85-year-old retired nurse who spent her life helping others. I raised Mark alone after his father passed away, worked double shifts, skipped meals just to make sure he had everything. And now this betrayal, right at the end of my life. When the doctor came in later to check on me, I asked him for privacy. That night, staring at the ceiling, I made a vow. I would rewrite my will. Not just rewrite it, craft it so perfectly that when they read it, it would break them. But I couldn't rush. If they suspected anything, they'd try to stop me. So, I played the weak, fragile grandma they believed I was. I smiled when they visited, I thanked them for their care, and I pretended to forget things. Inside, I was plotting. Weeks later, I secretly called my lawyer, Mr. Howard, an old friend who had known me since I was young. He came to the hospital under the guise of a medical consultant. I whispered my plans to him, and his eyes widened. "Eleanor, are you sure?" he asked softly. "Dead sure," I replied, my voice shaking not from weakness, but from the rage boiling inside me. "They think they'll inherit everything, but what they don't know is, I'll leave them something that will make them cry blood." Mr. Howard nodded, taking notes. "This will, it's going to change everything." And that's when we started crafting it, a will that would make the world gasp, and my greedy family regret every cruel word they spoke. But while I plotted, my family grew bolder. They started treating me like I was already dead. My granddaughter, Lily, even mocked me to my face one afternoon, saying, "Grandma, why do you even bother eating healthy? You're not going to be around much longer." I forced a smile, but inside, I was screaming. Every insult, every disrespectful glance fueled my determination. One night, as I sat in my wheelchair looking out at the moonlight spilling across the floor, I whispered to myself, "They think I'm powerless. They think I'm weak. They have no idea who they're dealing with." The day finally came when I signed the new will. Mr. Howard smiled as he sealed the documents. "It's done," he said. I felt a strange calm. My heart was at peace because I knew justice would come, not with shouting or revenge in life, but with silence and shock after my death. But little did I know, my family was planning something far darker than I expected. That night, I heard whispers outside my hospital room. The words "accelerate" and "make it quick" sent chills through my spine. Were they planning to end me sooner? My hands shook as I clutched the edge of my blanket. They didn't know what I had done. They didn't know their greed was about to destroy them. And just as I reached for the call button to alert the nurse, the door creaked open. The door opened slowly, and I held my breath. For a moment, I thought it was the nurse doing her nightly rounds, but it wasn't. It was Mark, my own son. He stepped inside quietly, closing the door behind him. His face was pale, his eyes darting around the room as if to make sure no one saw him come in. "Mom," he whispered, moving closer to my bed. I pretended to be half asleep, my eyes barely open. "Mark," I croaked, my voice frail. He forced a smile, but there was something in his eyes that made my stomach twist. How are you feeling? Still here, I muttered. Why are you visiting so late? He hesitated. Just wanted to check on you. His hand slipped into his pocket. I couldn't see what he was holding, but my instincts screamed danger. Mark, I said softly, you look nervous. His jaw clenched. You've been through enough, Mom. Maybe it's time to let go. My heart stopped. Those words confirmed everything I feared. My own flesh and blood was ready to speed up my death. For money. For the house, the savings, the inheritance I worked my entire life for. He leaned closer, his voice trembling. It's for the best. You won't have to suffer anymore. I bit back the tears. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him I knew everything, but I stayed calm. If he thought I was weak, I would use that against him. Just then, the door opened again, and a nurse walked in, startled to see Mark there. He quickly stepped back, mumbling something about leaving. The nurse frowned but didn't question him. He left the room without looking back, and my heart pounded in my chest. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed awake, watching the shadows on the ceiling, thinking about how deep their betrayal had gone. They weren't just greedy, they were dangerous. The next morning, I called Mr. Howard again. We need to make sure the will is ironclad, I told him. They're desperate enough to kill me. They must never see a penny of my money. He agreed, adding a final twist to the document that would legally shatter them. Days passed, and I acted weaker than ever, letting them think they were winning. But I was also preparing something else. Letters, recordings, proof of their betrayal. If anything happened to me, the world would know what they did. One afternoon, while Lily scrolled through her phone by my bed, she laughed. Grandma, you know Mark said once you're gone, we're selling this house and moving to Florida? He's already talking about how he'll spend the money. I looked at her with a sad smile. Oh, Lily, you'll find out soon enough that money doesn't always bring happiness. She rolled her eyes and left the room. That night, I asked the nurse to place a small camera in the corner of my room. She was an old friend from my nursing days, and she agreed without asking questions. I needed evidence, every word, every move they made. The footage from the next night would haunt me forever. It showed my daughter-in-law slipping something into my water while she thought I was asleep. I didn't drink it, of course. I poured it out when they weren't watching. But the proof was there. I saved the video on a hidden drive and gave a copy to Mr. Howard. If anything happens to me, I told him, release this to the police and play it at the reading of my will. He nodded. The more they tried to destroy me, the more determined I became. I was no longer just planning a revenge in my will, I was preparing to expose them to the world. But their greed was growing out of control. The following evening, as the sun set, I heard Mark whispering outside my room again. This time, he wasn't alone. His wife was with him. We need to do it tonight, she hissed. If she changes that will, we're screwed. My heart raced. I reached for the call button, but before I could press it, the door slammed open. Mark stood there, holding something in his hand. It glinted in the dim light. He stepped closer, his face cold. Mom, it's time. I froze. My hands trembled. My breath came in short gasps. He raised his hand. And suddenly, the hallway filled with shouting. Nurses ran in, pushing him back. The object clattered to the floor, a syringe. Mark stammered, "It's not what it looks like." But I knew. Oh, I knew. As they dragged him out, he shouted, "You can't stop me, Mom. That money is mine." I looked him straight in the eyes and whispered, "You just lost everything." Because what he didn't know was that the syringe, his words, and his actions were all caught on camera. And when he saw what was in my will, he would wish he had never been born. The hospital turned into chaos that night. Mark was escorted out by security, and his wife followed him, screaming that it was all a misunderstanding. I sat there, gripping my blanket, my heart pounding like a drum. The camera had captured every second, and the syringe lay as undeniable evidence on the floor. The head nurse came to me, her face pale. "Mrs. Mitchell, do you want us to call the police?" I took a deep breath. "Not yet," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "Let him think he still has a chance. Let them both think they're safe. When the time comes, their own greed will destroy them." The next morning, Mark didn't come to visit. Neither did his wife. Instead, I received a text message from him. "You think you're smart, Mom? We'll see who wins this game." I saved the message. It was another piece of the puzzle that would one day bury him. A week later, the doctors discharged me. I went back to my house, the one Mark had been planning to sell. My blonde hair, though faded and thin now, gleamed under the sun as I stepped into the home I had built with my blood and sweat. They had no idea that I had already moved most of my assets, leaving only an empty shell for them to fight over. Inside the house, I felt like a stranger. Pictures of Mark as a child, of my late husband, of the life I had sacrificed everything for, each one stabbed at my heart. How could my own son turn into such a monster? Still, I wasn't done. I called Mr. Howard and finalized the will, adding the last touches. Every single asset, my savings, my investments, the house, would go to a charitable foundation in my late husband's name. Mark and his wife would receive $1 each, along with a letter explaining why. All evidence, videos, recordings, messages, would be played in front of everyone at the reading of the will. When Mr. Howard read my conditions, he smirked. "Eleanor, this will, it's brutal. Are you sure?" I looked out the window at the garden I had planted years ago. Yes. They wanted my money? They'll choke on their own greed. For the next few days, I acted normal. I baked cookies, tended to my flowers, and even called Mark, pretending everything was fine. He sounded cold, impatient, always asking, "So, have you signed anything yet?" "Yes, dear," I said sweetly, lying through my teeth. "Everything's been arranged." He didn't know what I had really arranged. But then things took an even darker turn. One rainy evening, as I was sipping tea by the window, I saw a shadow move across my yard. My heart skipped. Slowly, I stood up and peered outside. There he was, Mark, trying to sneak into my house through the back door. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, whispering to the operator. But before the police arrived, Mark was already inside, his wet hair sticking to his forehead, his eyes wild. "Mom," he said, stepping toward me, "you're making this hard on yourself. Just sign everything over to me and this will be over." I stayed calm. "Mark, you've already lost. You just don't know it yet." His face twisted with rage. "You think you're clever? You think some stupid papers will stop me?" I pointed to the corner of the room. "Smile for the camera, son." His eyes widened as he saw the red light blinking. He lunged toward it, but sirens wailed outside. The police stormed in, dragging him away as he cursed and shouted that I was ruining his life. I stood there, trembling, but victorious. The next morning, his wife came to my house, crying fake tears. "Eleanor, please, he didn't mean it. He was just stressed. You know he loves you." I looked at her coldly. "Tell him I'll see him in court." She froze, her crocodile tears drying up. Then she spat at the ground and stormed off. The legal battle began soon after. They tried everything, claiming I was mentally unstable, forging documents, even sending threatening letters. But I had proof. I had witnesses. I had everything I needed to crush them. And through it all, I stayed quiet, letting them dig their own graves. When the day of the will reading finally came, the room was filled with tension. Mark sat with his wife, glaring at me as if looks could kill. Mr. Howard opened the envelope and began to read. As per Eleanor Mitchell's wishes, he started, his voice steady. Mark leaned forward, expecting to hear his name attached to millions. Instead, his jaw dropped as Mr. Howard read how everything was going to charity, how he and his wife were left with only $1 each, and how their actions had been recorded and would be handed to the authorities. Gasps filled the room as the video played. Mark sneaking into my hospital room, the syringe in his hand, his wife's whispers about accelerating my death. Mark's face turned white. His wife burst into tears. I stood, leaning on my cane, my voice calm but cutting. You wanted my money? You betrayed me for it? Enjoy your dollar. But before they could react, Mr. Howard said, "Oh, there's one more thing." The last part of the will contained a clause so devastating that Mark's face twisted in horror. And as the room erupted in chaos, I smiled. Because the true pain of my revenge was only just beginning. The chaos in the lawyer's office was almost too sweet to watch. Mark shot up from his chair, knocking it backward. His wife clutched her face as tears streamed down her cheeks, but I could tell they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of anger, fear, and humiliation. "What is this?" Mark shouted, his voice trembling. "You can't do this to me, Mom. You can't." Mr. Howard calmly adjusted his glasses and kept reading, his tone unshaken. Clause 24. If Mark Mitchell or his wife contests this will in any way, they are legally barred from receiving the symbolic $1 bequeathed to them. Additionally, all evidence of their actions will be submitted directly to the state prosecutor. Mark's face turned red. He banged his fist on the table. "This is fraud. She's not in her right mind." That was when Mr. Howard pulled out a stack of medical reports confirming my mental fitness. She was examined by 3 independent doctors, including a court-appointed psychiatrist. Her mental health is solid. The will stands. The room fell silent, except for the low hum of the air conditioner. I leaned forward slightly, gripping my cane. "You underestimated me, Mark. You thought I was too weak to fight back. But I've been preparing for this for months." His wife suddenly hissed, "This isn't over. You'll regret this." I gave her a cold smile. "The only thing I regret is ever letting you into this family." After the reading, the recording of their attempted murder was officially handed to the police. Within days, Mark was arrested. His wife tried to run, but she was caught too. The media got wind of the story. "Son tries to kill 85-year-old mother for inheritance." The headlines spread like wildfire. My phone rang non-stop with reporters asking for comments, but I stayed silent. I didn't need to defend myself. The truth was out there for everyone to see. Weeks passed, and the house that had been filled with tension and betrayal finally felt peaceful again. I could breathe. I could sit on my porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset, knowing justice had been served. But the storm wasn't completely over. One night, I received a letter. No return address. I opened it with trembling hands. The words were messy, almost scribbled in rage. "You think you've won, but you've destroyed my life. You took everything from me. I swear I'll make you pay, even if it's the last thing I do." My hands shook as I read it. The letter smelled of fear, anger, and desperation. I locked all my doors and installed new security cameras around the house. Despite the threats, I carried on with my life. I donated a large portion of my assets to a local children's hospital, something I had always wanted to do. Seeing those children smile gave me a peace that money could never buy. But Mark wasn't finished. One rainy night, as I was preparing for bed, I heard a noise outside. A shadow moved past my window. My heart pounded. Slowly, I reached for the baseball bat I kept by my bed and turned on all the lights. "Who's there?" I shouted. Silence. Then, a knock at the door. A slow, deliberate knock. I hesitated, clutching the bat, before creeping toward the door. I looked through the peephole, but it was too dark to see. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the door, only to open it to an empty porch. I stepped outside cautiously, the rain soaking my hair. Then I saw it, a knife stuck in the wooden railing, with a note pinned to it. "You can't hide forever." My breath caught in my throat. I backed away, locked the door, and called the police. When they arrived, they found nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. It was as if he had vanished into the night. But I knew he was out there, watching, waiting. Days later, the trial began. I had to face him in court. He looked thinner, his eyes wild, his hands trembling in shackles. When he saw me, he smirked. "You think you're safe, Mom? You think this courtroom will protect you?" he muttered as he was escorted to his seat. I stared straight back at him, unflinching. "You already lost, Mark. This is just the end of your game." The judge entered, and the trial began. Evidence was presented. Videos, recordings, messages. The jury watched, horrified, as they saw what my own son had done. Mark's smirk faded with every passing moment. His wife broke down on the stand, admitting everything. Finally, the verdict came, guilty. He screamed as they dragged him away, his voice echoing through the courtroom. "This isn't over. I'll get out. I'll make you regret this." I sat there, tears streaming down my face, but they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of relief, because I knew the next part of my plan would break him completely. In prison, he would soon receive a copy of the final letter in my will, one that revealed a truth so devastating it would destroy what was left of his soul. And as the judge's gavel slammed down, I whispered to myself, the real revenge hasn't even started yet. The courtroom emptied slowly after the verdict. Reporters swarmed outside, shouting questions, but I ignored them. I walked out with my cane, each step firm, my head held high. The rain had stopped, and the sky glowed orange with the setting sun. Justice was on my side, but deep inside, a storm still raged. Mark was locked away, but I knew his hatred for me hadn't died. It burned even hotter now. His threats echoed in my mind, especially the last one he screamed, "This isn't over." Back at home, I sat in my living room, staring at the old family photos on the wall. Pictures of a smiling boy, my Mark, holding my hand, playing in the yard, hugging me on Christmas mornings. Where had that little boy gone? My thoughts were interrupted by a call from Mr. Howard. "Eleanor," he said, his voice calm but sharp, "are you ready for the final phase?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation. "Send the letter." This wasn't an ordinary letter. This was the final dagger, one last twist of the knife that would pierce Mark's heart deeper than any punishment. It contained the truth about my assets, my decisions, and a shocking revelation about his father that I had kept buried for decades. The next morning, I visited the prison under police escort. Mark was brought out, handcuffed, his orange jumpsuit hanging loosely on his body. His eyes were cold, but there was a flicker of curiosity when he saw the envelope in my hand. "What is that?" he growled. "This," I said softly, sliding the envelope across the table, "is the truth you never wanted to hear." He snatched it up, ripped it open, and began reading. I watched his face change with every line, anger, confusion, then pure devastation. The letter revealed. He was not the sole heir to his father's fortune, because most of it was donated anonymously years ago. The man he thought was his biological father was not. His real father had abandoned me before Mark was born, and the man who raised him wasn't even related by blood. The money he had tried to kill me for was already gone, given away to causes he despised. At the bottom, I wrote in my own shaky handwriting, "Mark, you chose greed over love, and now you have nothing. I will remember you as my son, but the world will remember you as the man who betrayed his mother for money. I hope the echo of that truth haunts you forever." His hands shook as he crumpled the paper, his face red with rage. "You're lying. You're lying." I stood slowly, leaning on my cane. "I never lie, Mark. Goodbye." As the guards dragged him back to his cell, he screamed, "You'll pay for this. You'll regret it until your dying breath." The threats didn't stop. Letters arrived weekly, each one more unhinged than the last. He promised to escape, to kill me, to burn my world to the ground. But with every threat, I only grew stronger. I focused on living. I spent my days at the children's hospital I had funded, reading stories to sick kids, helping nurses with simple tasks. They loved me, and I loved them back. For the first time in years, I felt alive. Still, I knew Mark's anger was festering behind prison walls. Months passed. One cold winter morning, I received news that Mark had been moved to solitary confinement after attacking a guard. The warden called me personally. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, "your son has become unpredictable. He talks to himself, screams at night. He keeps saying he'll get out to finish what he started." I thanked him for the call, but I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, staring at the snow falling softly, whispering to myself, "Let him rot in his hate. I'll live in my peace." Then something unexpected happened. I received a letter, not from Mark, but from his wife. She had divorced him and was living with her parents. She begged me for forgiveness, saying she was manipulated, that she never truly wanted to hurt me. I didn't respond. But her letter included one line that chilled me to the bone. "He says he has friends on the outside. They're watching you." That very night, I heard glass shatter downstairs. My heart stopped. I grabbed the bat and crept toward the sound. My security cameras were recording everything, but my hands trembled as I reached for the light switch. The living room window was broken. The curtains swayed in the cold wind. Footprints trailed across the floor. Then I heard it, a voice whispering in the dark. "Mom, I'm here." My blood ran cold. Was it Mark? Or someone working for him? Before I could react, a shadow moved toward me fast. I raised the bat, ready to fight, but the shadow lunged, and everything went black. When I woke up, I was tied to a chair in my own basement. My head throbbed, my vision blurry. The shadow stepped into the light. It wasn't Mark. It was one of his friends, tattoos up his arms, a wicked grin on his face. "Your son sends his regards," the man sneered. Fear surged through me, but so did rage. Because I wasn't done fighting. I would make sure they all cried blood. The man circled me like a predator, his boots heavy on the basement floor. The dim light bulb above flickered, casting his shadow across the walls. I tried to steady my breathing, but my heart pounded so loud I was sure he could hear it. "So," he said with a smirk, "Mark told me a lot about you. The old witch who ruined his life." I clenched my jaw. "Your friend ruined his own life." He chuckled darkly. "He wants you to suffer. Said you'd know what it feels like to be powerless. Is that why you tied up an 85-year-old woman?" I spat back, surprising even myself with the venom in my voice. He laughed, but there was a glint of annoyance in his eyes. "You're not scared, huh? Maybe you should be." I stared at him, refusing to look away. "I've been through worse than you," he growled, leaning closer. "Not yet. But you will." I needed to stay calm. Panic would get me killed. I scanned the room. The ropes were tight, but not impossible to loosen. My phone was nowhere in sight, but I could hear the faint beep of my security cameras upstairs. If they were still recording, the police might see this. The man paced, pulling something from his pocket, a knife. The blade glistened under the light. My breath hitched, but I stayed still. Mark said to scare you, maybe rough you up a bit, he said, tapping the knife against his hand. But me? I like to leave a message. I swallowed hard. You think you'll get away with this? The police already have every piece of evidence against him. And now they'll have you too. He tilted his head, smirking. Not if no one finds you. At that moment, the basement door creaked open. My heart leapt. The man spun around, knife ready. It was the nurse who had helped me at the hospital months ago. She had come to check on me after I missed our weekly call. She froze when she saw the scene. Oh my God! The man lunged at her, but she screamed and slammed the door shut. I heard her footsteps pounding upstairs, followed by the sound of my security alarm blaring. He cursed, rushing to the window to see flashing lights approaching. You called the cops? I smirked through my fear. I didn't have to. They were already watching. He turned on me, his eyes wild, but before he could make a move, the basement door burst open. Police stormed in, guns drawn. The man dropped his knife and raised his hands, snarling as they tackled him to the ground. They cut me loose, and I collapsed into the nurse's arms. You saved my life, I whispered, trembling. The officer nodded. We got here just in time. Your cameras caught everything. This guy's going away for a long time. As they dragged the man away, he shouted, Mark will get you. This isn't over. I watched them haul him out, my body shaking, but my mind clear. It will be over, I murmured, when every last one of you pays for what you've done. The next day, I was back in the hospital under protective custody. Reporters swarmed outside, hungry for details. The police warned me that Mark was still sending messages from prison, ordering people to hurt me. But now, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about survival. Mr. Howard visited me, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Eleanor, the media is on your side. The world knows the truth. But Mark is becoming dangerous. You may need to move somewhere safe. I shook my head. I won't run. This is my home. I'll face whatever comes. He sighed, but he knew there was no changing my mind. Weeks passed, and the trial for the man who attacked me was swift. He was sentenced to decades in prison, and his testimony revealed something chilling. Mark had promised him a share of the inheritance if he finished the job. When the judge read that out loud, the courtroom gasped. The judge added extra years to Mark's sentence for plotting crimes from behind bars. But Mark only smiled from his cage, his eyes burning into me. You think this is the end, Mom? He sneered as the guards dragged him away. You have no idea what's coming. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my hospital bed, staring out the window at the moon. For the first time, fear crept in deep. How far would my son go? How many people would he send after me? Then I remembered something I had kept hidden all these years. A secret property, a small cabin deep in the woods where no one knew I once lived. If they wanted to play a game, I would play it smarter. The next morning, I packed my things. I told the nurse I was going to a safe place. I didn't tell anyone where. But as I drove away, the feeling of being watched crept over me again. Every car behind me felt suspicious, every shadow a threat. When I finally reached the cabin, the peace of the forest wrapped around me like a blanket. I lit a fire, sat by the window, and whispered to myself, "Here they won't find me." But as the flames crackled, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "You can run, Mom, but you can't hide." My blood turned to ice, because attached to the message was a photo of my cabin. Someone had already found me. The phone slipped from my trembling hand and landed on the wooden floor with a thud. My eyes darted to the window, searching the dark tree-line for movement. The photo they sent, it was taken from outside. Someone had been there, close enough to capture my cabin without me noticing. My heart pounded against my ribs. I forced myself to breathe, to think. Fear was trying to take over, but I wouldn't let it. Not now. I grabbed the shotgun my late husband had left behind. My hands shook as I loaded it, the sound echoing through the small cabin. I crouched by the window, my eyes scanning the shadows. The night was silent except for the rustling of leaves. Then I heard it, a twig snapping. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice sharp despite my racing heart. "Show yourself." No answer. Another sound, this time, footsteps crunching on the gravel outside. Slowly, I backed away from the window, my finger tightening on the trigger. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they stopped just outside the door. I aimed at the door, ready to fire if it burst open. Seconds felt like hours. Then, bang! The door rattled as something hit it. My body jolted, but the door held. A voice came from the other side, low and menacing. "Open up, Grandma. Let's talk." It wasn't Mark. It was someone else, another one of his so-called friends. "I'm armed," I shouted. "Step 1 foot in, and you won't make it out." The man laughed coldly. "You think that rusty gun scares me? Mark wants a message delivered. I'm just here to collect what's his." I gritted my teeth. "Tell him he'll never get it. He'll rot in prison before he sees a cent." The man growled, kicking the door again. The wood cracked under the force. I fired a warning shot through the window. The sound exploded in the night, sending birds scattering from the trees. Silence. Then I heard him curse and run off into the woods. I stood there shaking, clutching the shotgun until my knuckles turned white. The police arrived an hour later. They found footprints, cigarette butts, and the remains of a campfire near the treeline. "You did the right thing," one officer said. "But this isn't safe. They're not giving up." "I'm not giving up either," I replied, my voice trembling but firm. "I'll fight until my last breath." The next morning, I called Mr. Howard from the cabin. "It's time," I said. "Prepare the final release." He hesitated. "Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no turning back." "I'm sure," I said. "Mark wanted war. He's going to get it." That afternoon, Mr. Howard held a press conference. Every major network broadcast it live. Cameras flashed as he stepped to the podium, holding a thick envelope. "This," he announced, "is the final statement and evidence from Eleanor Mitchell regarding the attempted murders, extortion, and threats made against her by her son, Mark Mitchell, and his associates." The reporters leaned forward, hungry for every word. He played the security footage, Mark plotting, his friend breaking into my home, the threats, the attacks. The world saw everything. Public outrage exploded. People across the country rallied behind me, calling for harsher punishment for Mark. Back at the prison, Mark watched the broadcast. The guard said he smashed a chair against the wall, screaming until they restrained him. That night, I received a final letter from him. The handwriting was almost illegible, the words smeared with rage. "You think you've won, Mom? You humiliated me in front of the whole world. But this isn't over. When I get out." The rest of the letter was torn, as if he had ripped it in half mid-sentence. Days passed. I stayed at the cabin, my shotgun always close, my phone fully charged. Each night, the woods seemed to whisper around me, carrying my son's threats through the wind. Then one night, as I sat by the fire, there was a knock on the door. Not loud, not threatening, just a single, soft knock. I froze, gripping the shotgun. "Who is it?" I demanded. No answer. The knock came again, softer this time. I aimed at the door. "Say something or I'll shoot." Finally, a voice answered. "It's me, Lily. My granddaughter." I opened the door cautiously. There she stood, trembling in the cold, her eyes wide with fear. "Grandma," she whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't know what they were planning. I came to warn you. Mark, he's escaping tonight." My blood ran cold. "What?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "He bribed someone inside the prison. He's coming for you." The words hit me like a punch. My hands tightened around the shotgun. "Then we'll be ready," I said. Because if my son came here, it would be the last mistake he ever made. The cabin was deathly quiet after Lily's warning. The only sounds were the crackling fire and the wind pressing against the wooden walls. My granddaughter shivered, hugging herself as she stood near the doorway. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, my voice low but steady. She nodded, eyes red from crying. "Grandma," he said he'd make you pay tonight. I heard him whisper it to someone on the phone during his last call from prison. "They're helping him escape." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "You were brave to come here. But you shouldn't have. It's dangerous." "I couldn't let him hurt you," she said, tears spilling over. "I know I've been horrible before. I believed their lies about you. But now I see. They're monsters." I hugged her tightly, whispering, "You're my blood, Lily. You're forgiven." We barricaded the doors and windows with whatever we could find, furniture, logs, even nails from the toolbox. I handed her a flashlight and kept my shotgun close. The night crept in slowly, wrapping the cabin in darkness. My heart pounded with each tick of the clock. Hours passed, and then we heard it, the sound of a car engine far off in the distance. Headlights briefly cut through the trees. Lily gasped, clutching my arm. "He's here," she whispered. The car stopped. Silence followed. Then, the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching through the snow toward the cabin. I raised the shotgun, pointing it at the door. "Stay behind me," I told Lily. The footsteps stopped just outside. "Mom!" a voice called softly. It was Mark. My heart twisted. Even after everything, a part of me still wanted to believe my son could be saved. But I knew better. "Go away, Mark," I shouted. "The police are on their way." He chuckled darkly. "You think I'm scared of the police? I came to finish what I started." The doorknob rattled. Then came a loud bang as he kicked the door, splintering the wood. Lily screamed. I aimed the shotgun and fired a warning shot into the air. The sound thundered through the cabin, shaking the walls. But Mark didn't stop. He kicked again, harder, breaking through the barricade. The door swung open, and there he stood, wild-eyed, dirty, his prison uniform torn. "Give me the money, Mom," he shouted, stepping inside. "Where is it?" "There is no money," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "It's gone. All of it. I gave it away." His face twisted in rage. "You liar!" He lunged at me. I fired again, the blast grazing the floor near his feet. He stumbled but kept coming. Lily screamed as he grabbed my arm, trying to wrestle the gun away. We struggled, the barrel twisting between us. "You should have just died quietly," he snarled, his spit hitting my face. Summoning all the strength left in me, I shoved him back with a scream. He fell against the wall, knocking over a shelf. The commotion gave me just enough time to cock the gun again. "Don't make me do it, Mark," I warned, tears streaming down my face. "Don't make me kill my own son." He froze, breathing heavily, his eyes flickering between rage and something almost human. For a moment, I thought he might stop. Then he smirked. "You don't have it in you." He charged. The sound of the gunshot ripped through the night. The recoil knocked me back, and my ears rang. Mark collapsed to the floor, clutching his leg and screaming in agony. Blue and red lights flashed outside as police sirens wailed. Officers stormed in, weapons drawn. They tackled him before he could move, pinning him to the ground as he thrashed and shouted, "She shot me! She's crazy! She's lying!" The officers ignored him, reading him his rights as they handcuffed him. One of them helped me to my feet, while another comforted Lily. "You're safe now, ma'am," the officer said. I nodded weakly, tears streaming down my face. "No," I whispered, looking at Mark as they dragged him away. "Not safe. Not until he's gone for good." As the police car drove off with him screaming inside, I sank to the floor, exhausted. Lily held me, sobbing into my shoulder. "It's over, Grandma," she said softly. But I knew it wasn't. Because as they drove him away, he looked back at me through the window, his eyes filled with hatred. And I knew in my heart, this wasn't the end. The days after the cabin attack passed in a blur. Police stayed on watch, but I barely slept. Every creak of the house, every shadow outside the window made my heart race. Lily stayed close to me, refusing to leave my side. She tried to be strong, but I could see the fear in her eyes every time we heard a car pass on the road. Mark was back in prison, this time under maximum security. The news was everywhere. Escaped inmate captured after attacking elderly mother. Reporters camped outside my property, but I gave no interviews. I had nothing to say to the world. Not yet. One evening, Mr. Howard visited. He brought new documents and a grim expression. "Eleanor," he said, "I have to be honest. Mark's lawyers are fighting tooth and nail to reduce his sentence. They're claiming you provoked him, that you've been unstable." I scoffed bitterly. "Unstable? I've been more sane than all of them combined." He leaned forward, his voice low. "We need to take this one step further. I suggest we use the final evidence, the recordings you gave me. The ones you've been holding back." My hand tightened on the armrest. I had recorded more than anyone knew. Not just Mark's threats, but confessions, conversations, proof of every crime he and his wife plotted. I had been saving it for the moment when there was no turning back. "Release it," I said finally. "Let the world see who he really is." The next day, Mr. Howard leaked the evidence to the media and handed copies to the court. It was devastating. Recordings of Mark planning my death, hiring people to stalk me, promising them everything if they succeeded. The public turned against him completely. Even his former friends started speaking out, admitting they had been scared of him. The prison increased his sentence to life without parole. For the first time, I felt a flicker of peace. But peace didn't last. That night, Lily woke me with a scream. I rushed to her room, my heart pounding, and found her clutching her phone. On the screen was a message from an unknown number. "You can lock me up, but you can't lock away my reach. Watch your back." Attached was a photo of us through the cabin window, taken that very night. I grabbed her shoulders. "Did you see anyone outside?" She shook her head, crying. "No, Grandma." The cameras didn't catch anything either. Whoever sent that message wasn't Mark. It was someone working for him. Someone close enough to know where we were hiding. I called the police, and they arrived quickly, combing the area with flashlights and dogs. They found nothing, no footprints, no tire tracks. The lead officer sighed. "It's like they're ghosts. Whoever this is, they're careful." I tightened my robe around me, shivering. He's controlling this from inside. He's still playing his game. The officer promised to increase patrols, but I didn't feel safe anymore. The cabin no longer felt like a refuge, it felt like a trap. The following day, I packed our things. "Lily, we're leaving," I said firmly. "We'll go somewhere he can't find us." "Where?" she asked, her voice trembling. I thought for a moment. "Somewhere he doesn't even know exists." We drove through back roads for hours, moving from motel to motel. I left no trace, paid in cash, used no phones except for emergencies. Each night, I checked the locks twice and kept the shotgun close. But no matter how far we went, the feeling of being watched followed us. One night, we stopped at a small roadside inn. The manager was friendly, the place quiet. I allowed myself to relax. Just a little. Lily and I had dinner in the room, laughing softly for the first time in weeks. But just as I was about to turn off the lights, a shadow passed by our window. I froze. Slowly, I reached for the gun. Then came the knock. Soft. Deliberate. Lily clung to me. "Grandma, don't open it." I aimed the shotgun at the door. "Who's there?" I demanded. A voice replied, deep and calm. "Mrs. Mitchell. I have a message from Mark." My blood ran cold. The man continued, his voice almost mocking. "He says you can run as far as you like, but when he's ready, he'll take everything from you, even the girl." Lily gasped. I tightened my grip on the gun. "Get away from the door," I warned. He chuckled. "You think you can stop what's coming?" Before I could respond, the police sirens blared outside. Patrol cars pulled up, and the man disappeared into the night like smoke. The officers stormed the area but found nothing once again. As dawn broke, I sat on the bed, exhausted. Lily slept beside me, clutching my arm. I whispered to myself, "This ends now. No more running. No more hiding. I'm going to end this once and for all." The next day, I made calls. To lawyers. To reporters. To every contact who had stood by me during this nightmare. If Mark thought he could control the game, I was about to flip the board. I arranged one last move, one so devastating that it would rip away every bit of power he thought he had left. And on the night before it all unfolded, as I sat alone by the window, I felt it again, eyes watching me from the darkness. This time, I didn't flinch. I smiled. Because tomorrow, I would make my final move. And when it hit him, Mark would finally cry blood. The sun rose slow and heavy the next morning, painting the motel walls in a pale gold light. Lily was still asleep, but my mind had been awake all night, weaving together the last threads of my plan. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about ending Mark's hold over me. Forever. I dressed carefully, my hands steady, my heart oddly calm. I left Lily a note on the bedside table. "Stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone but me." Then I stepped outside, where a black car waited. Mr. Howard sat in the back seat, looking grim. "Are you ready?" he asked. I nodded. More than ever. The courthouse was packed with reporters, cameras flashing as we arrived. Today wasn't just another hearing. It was the day my final evidence would be released to the public. Inside, the tension was electric. Mark sat at the defense table, shackled, his hair longer, his face gaunt but his eyes still burning with hatred. When he saw me, he smirked. "Come to watch me break you one last time, Mom?" I met his gaze, unblinking. "No, Mark. I came to end this." The judge called the session to order. Mr. Howard stood and began presenting the last set of evidence. Videos, recordings, documents that no one had ever seen before. They showed everything. Mark bribing guards, hiring criminals, plotting attacks even from prison. But that wasn't all. The final video was the most devastating. It was a secret recording of Mark himself, boasting to an associate on a smuggled phone. "She's old, weak. I'll get out, and when I do, I'll take everything. I'll burn her world to the ground." The courtroom gasped. Even the judge looked shaken. Mark's smirk faltered for the first time. Then Mr. Howard pulled out the final trump card, a legal document signed by me just days ago. "Your Honor," Mr. Howard said, his voice ringing clear, This is a permanent transfer of all remaining assets under Eleanor Mitchell's name to the State Crime Victims Fund. There is now nothing, absolutely nothing, that Mark Mitchell or anyone acting on his behalf can claim. Furthermore, Mrs. Mitchell has issued a restraining order extending to any individual or organization acting in his interest. Murmurs filled the courtroom. Mark's face twisted in rage. "You witch!" he screamed, standing so fast his chair toppled. "You think this is over? You think you can just erase me?" Guards restrained him, forcing him back down. I stood slowly, leaning on my cane. My voice trembled, but it carried across the silent room. "I didn't erase you, Mark. You erased yourself the moment you chose greed over love. You're not my son anymore. You're just a warning to the world." The judge banged the gavel. "Order! Mr. Mitchell, your behavior only confirms your guilt. Your sentence is hereby extended to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, with maximum security confinement." Mark thrashed against the guards, screaming, "You'll regret this, Mom. You'll regret it until the day you die." I looked at him one last time and whispered, "No, Mark. The only one crying blood now is you." They dragged him away, kicking and shouting. Cameras flashed as reporters yelled questions. But I felt a strange peace settle over me. The fight was over. Later that evening, I returned to Lily. She ran to me, hugging me tight. "Is it done?" she asked, her voice trembling. I smiled softly. "It's done." For the first time in months, I slept without fear. The nightmares had ended. Weeks passed. The world moved on, but my life had changed forever. I sold the cabin and the house, choosing to live quietly in a small seaside town where no one knew my name. I spent my days reading, walking along the beach, and baking cookies with Lily whenever she visited. Mark's letters still came from prison, filled with threats and hatred, but they no longer had power over me. They were just words, empty, desperate words from a man who had lost everything. One morning, I stood on the porch, watching the sunrise. The waves crashed gently against the shore, and the salty air filled my lungs. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I whispered to the wind, "You wanted to destroy me, Mark. But in the end, you only made me stronger." The world would always remember Eleanor Mitchell not as a victim, but as the grandmother who turned betrayal into strength, who stood against evil even when it came from her own blood. And somewhere in the depths of a prison cell, my son sat alone, his screams echoing off the cold walls, his eyes burning with a hatred that no one cared to see anymore. Because in the end, he had lost everything. And I had won.